So, your purpose has collapsed. You woke up one morning, or maybe it happened slowly, like paint peeling from the edges of your life. And suddenly, the thing that gave you motion, the job, the dream, the belief, the identity is gone. And with it goes the story. No more direction, no goal, no title, just silence. You sit with your morning coffee, and it doesn't taste like anything. You scroll through your phone, but every post feels like a lie you no longer believe in. The future you were building no longer makes sense. And in the absence of why, the question comes, what now? Let's not dress this up. This isn't a detour. This isn't a test. This is collapse, and it is sacred. Because when the scaffolding falls, when the mask cracks, when the rituals stop working, what's left is not a problem. It's the truth. The truth is, you were never your purpose. You were never your productivity. You were never the version of yourself the world wanted to applaud. That was the costume. The real you, the one sitting now in the quiet rubble, is just beginning to wake up. And it hurts. It feels like floating in deep space with no tether. You can't go back, but you also can't go forward, because forward no longer exists. There is only now. And now is unbearable. This thing you're feeling, it has many names. Depression, disillusionment, existential fatigue, but none of them quite fit. Because it's not sadness. Sadness has a cause, a lost love, a missed opportunity. This is different. This is emptiness. It's the feeling that nothing matters, not in a nihilistic scream, but in a quiet, bone-deep sigh. You're not angry. You're not even asking for much. You just want something, anything to feel real again. But it doesn't. Not music, not ambition, not even hope. You've entered the terrain of silence. And the silence isn't peaceful. It's terrifying, because it strips away everything you used to call you. There's a reason most people never get here. They spend their lives climbing, achieving, chasing, not because they're full of purpose, but because they're terrified of what happens when the chasing stops. But now you're here. And the world has no script for this. No app, no productivity hack, no 7-day course to teach you how to overcome meaninglessness. That's because you're not meant to overcome it. You're meant to face it. The moment this emptiness arrives, your instincts go wild. Find something new, start a project, rebrand yourself, volunteer, travel, meditate, post about healing, make it mean something, anything. But that's not healing. That's panic dressed up as growth. We're all addicts when it comes to purpose. We crave the feeling of mattering, of being seen as strong, useful, evolved. And when that sense of meaning collapses, we don't grieve it, we replace it. It's the same desperation, just with better lighting. Modern culture doesn't teach us to sit with the void. It teaches us to cover it in productivity. Pain is just an obstacle to optimize. Emptiness is treated like a bug in the software, something to debug with therapy, tech, or a wellness retreat. But the truth is, emptiness isn't a malfunction, it's the raw code. You've simply reached the part of yourself that cannot be sold, fixed, or improved. It just is. And if you can bear to look at it, if you can stay with it, without reaching for distraction, you'll begin to hear something beneath the panic. Not comfort, not wisdom, just presence. A slow, breath by breath, return to the part of you that was never lost, only buried beneath all the noise of needing to be something. You've been taught all your life to have a purpose. Teachers told you to find your passion. Companies told you to find your why. Philosophers told you that meaning was the essence of being human. But no one warned you that purpose itself can become a kind of violence. Yes, violence, because purpose demands that every moment serve something. Purpose says, don't just sit, produce. Don't just be, become. Don't just exist, justify it. And under that command, you begin to brutalize yourself. You measure your worth by outcomes. You compare your pace to others. You chase milestones like a ghost chasing its own echo. And every quiet hour, every unproductive day begins to feel like a crime. We call this ambition. But look closer. It's addiction. A constant state of self-surveillance. A private tyranny in which you are both prisoner and guard. Purpose is a polite word for servitude when it is not examined. Because if your sense of value depends on what you do, then your peace will vanish the moment you cannot do. When your body weakens, when the job ends, when the applause fades, what remains? You. Just you. And for many, that is unbearable. You can see it in the eyes of the retired executive who doesn't know what to do with his mornings. In the activist who burns out trying to fix a world that cannot be fixed. In the artist who stops creating when no one is watching, they mistake exhaustion for meaninglessness. But really, they are meeting the self behind the mask for the first time. The collapse of purpose isn't the death of life, it's the death of illusion. The death of the idea that you were ever in control of your own narrative. Modern man doesn't live, he narrates himself. Every act, every choice, every expression must fit into a story that makes sense. But when the story cracks, when the why disintegrates, the narration stops, and so does the illusion of identity. That stillness that follows isn't failure, it's exposure. You are no longer a protagonist, you are simply a being, breathing, waiting, without script. And that is precisely what our civilization cannot allow. We live in a cult of usefulness. Every silence must be filled with productivity. Every pause must be justified with purpose. Every human must be a project in progress, in motion, in monetization. So when your motion stops, society doesn't know what to do with you. It calls you lost, unmotivated, depressed. But maybe you're not lost at all. Maybe you're just done performing. The world cannot fathom a person who chooses to simply be, because being real, silent being is unprofitable. When your purpose falls apart, it's not just the external world that crumbles, it's the internal scaffolding too. You start asking questions that sound like madness. Who am I if I'm not chasing anything? What is life if not progress? Why do I feel like I'm disappearing? These questions are not symptoms of failure, they are symptoms of awakening. The emptiness you feel is not the absence of meaning. It is the absence of lies. It is the quiet left behind after the machinery of pretending shuts down. Most people never reach this stage because they keep the noise running, the television, the schedule, the endless pursuit of next. They mistake motion for existence. But you have stopped. You are standing in the wreckage of your own story. And though it feels like death, it is actually the first moment of truth. You are not decaying. You are disintegrating, and there's a difference. Decay is what happens to the body. Disintegration is what happens to illusions. You are being stripped down to essence. Every false identity is peeling away. Every fragile belief is dissolving. And what remains is the raw, unadorned fact of being alive. That is what emptiness truly is, the ground beneath all stories. Stillness is terrifying because it removes the mirror of purpose. When there is nothing to strive for, nothing to fix, nothing to post, nothing to win, you are left face to face with yourself. Not the curated self, but the silent one. The self that watches, the self that doesn't perform, the self that doesn't care about being seen. At first, you won't recognize it. You'll look at your own reflection and feel like you're staring at a stranger. You'll ask, where did I go? But the truth is, you never went anywhere. You just stopped pretending. You are seeing what you've always been. Awareness without narrative. The world calls that emptiness. I call it the beginning. Quote, every philosophy worth remembering begins with collapse. Before any truth can enter, illusion must burn, and illusion burns painfully. The fall of purpose is not the loss of meaning, it is the exposure of how fragile your meaning was. You thought you were building a life, you were building a cage. When the cage collapses, don't rush to rebuild it. Stay among the ruins. Sit with the dust. Let the echo of your old ambitions fade. You will want to fill the silence. You will want to explain it, name it, fix it. But the more you do, the less you'll hear what the silence has to teach. And what it teaches is both brutal and beautiful. That there is life after purpose, and it is quieter than you ever imagined. You were taught that if you stop moving, you'll die. Not biologically, spiritually, existentially. The idea that stillness equals failure runs deep in modern life. We measure value in motion, productivity, output, evolution. Even rest is framed as a means to get back on track, as if stillness is only permitted if it serves your return to usefulness. But what if there is no track? What if the real path begins when you sit, when you stop, when you refuse to push the narrative forward, not because you gave up, but because you finally saw through it? That moment, the one they call rock bottom, it's not the end. It's the first stillness that isn't just exhaustion. It's not collapse, it's release. The body, no longer enslaved to some idea of destiny, begins to breathe differently. Not faster, not deeper, just honestly. And in that breath, a strange thing happens. You don't vanish, you don't rot, you remain. Still, whole, unhurried, undirected. and alive. You have been taught to live inside a plot. Every beginning must have an arc. Every arc must have tension. Every tension must be resolved. But life without plot isn't emptiness. It's freedom. There are days when nothing happens. Nothing moves forward. Nothing is improved. And yet, the leaves fall, the sun shifts, the coffee cools, and all of it is life. Stillness isn't absence. It's intimacy. It is life at room temperature, without the heat of ambition, without the frost of shame. And yes, it feels empty at first, because you're detoxing from drama, from purpose, from the deep narcotic belief that every second of your existence must mean something. But meaning is a story we place on top of life. It's not life itself. When you remove the story, you're not dead. You're just here, really here. This is the art. This is the part most skip. After the fall, after the collapse of purpose, you must resist the urge to fill the void. Do not rush to build a new identity. Do not create a new mission. Do not say, now I help others avoid what I went through. That too is a reflex. That too is the will disguised as wisdom. You must learn to walk inside the void without naming it, without mapping it, without mining it for gold. The void doesn't exist to teach you anything. It exists because it is what remains when illusion ends. And if you can endure that, if you can sit in the stillness without turning it into a sermon, you will discover something even rarer than purpose. Peace. Not the kind they sell in books or retreats, but the quiet, humbling, ego-shattering kind. The kind that asks for nothing. The kind that just is. Stillness isn't weakness. Enduring emptiness isn't retreat. It is the most difficult, most profound kind of strength. To remain conscious, present, breathing, when every cell in your body wants to run. Anyone can act. Anyone can speak. But the man who can sit in stillness, who can watch the storm of not knowing pass through him without building a shelter of distraction, that man is no longer ruled by the world. He is free. And frightening, because he cannot be baited. He cannot be sold dreams. He cannot be frightened into obedience. He knows that even when everything falls away, even when purpose dies, something remains. And that something is enough. There's a moment it doesn't come fast, and it doesn't come loud when the ache begins to change. You don't notice it at first. You're still waking up in silence, still moving through the day without direction. But something has shifted. The emptiness no longer feels like an emergency. You begin to notice small things. A shadow moving across a wall, the sound of wind threading through an open window, the weight of your body in a chair no longer waiting to be anywhere else. This is the quiet miracle, being here without needing a reason. You're not back. You haven't recovered. There's no triumph. But something has settled, and in that settling, there's peace. Purpose always asks you to matter, to be relevant, useful, productive, seen. But relevance is a trap. It keeps you dancing for approval, social, professional, existential. It tells you that rest must be earned, that peace must be deserved. But now you've stopped dancing. You no longer need to matter. And in that release, you begin to matter in a way no system can measure. Not as a role, not as a success, not even as a cautionary tale, but as a human, breathing, witnessing, responding not because you should, but because you can. You start laughing again. Not often, not predictably. Maybe it's the absurdity of it all. Maybe it's the way a dog rolls in the grass like it knows a secret. Maybe it's just a miracle that coffee still tastes good, even when you've stopped trying to be anyone. It catches you off guard, that moment of joy, because it isn't anchored in achievement. It doesn't say, I'm glad I accomplished this. It says, I'm glad I exist just for this moment. This is not the joy of the redeemed. This is the joy of the emptied, of the one who no longer clings. You've been taught that life is a journey from who you are to who you could be. But what if that journey is a trick? What if becoming is just a way to delay being? What if the whole point was never to transform but to see? See the futility. See the performance. See the absurdity. And then, in that seeing, stop running. That doesn't mean you won't change. You will. But now, the change comes from within. Not from hunger, not from fear, but from rhythm, from breath, from life moving through you, without force. You are not becoming a better person. You are becoming a quieter witness to what you already are. And that finally is enough. There is no story anymore, no arc to fulfill, no destiny to chase. You live moment to moment, not as a monk, not as a sage, but as someone who has simply given up the need to explain themselves. You don't owe the world a narrative. You don't owe anyone a redemption arc. You are here, breathing, broken, maybe, but breathing. And if that is all today, is that still beautiful? There comes a point just after the silence becomes bearable, just after the ache dulls into background hum, when the mind begins to whisper, maybe now I'm ready to rebuild. It sounds innocent, healthy even. It offers familiar forms. A new project, a new calling, a new spiritual identity. Something to show that you've grown from the emptiness, that you've emerged stronger, wiser, healed. But be careful. Most resurrections are premature, and most new selves are just the old self dressed in better language. The ego is cunning. It will take even your emptiness and turn it into status. It will post your stillness online. It will monetize your collapse into a personal brand. It will say, I came through the darkness while quietly begging the darkness to validate its journey. But the void doesn't give applause. And if you listen closely, it doesn't want you to leave so soon. Meaning is addictive. It feels like oxygen after drowning. It gives shape to suffering. It tells you your pain was worth it, that it meant something. And sometimes it does. But if you reach for meaning too quickly, you end up grabbing illusion again, just one with better lighting. This is what happens to people who leave the void without digesting it. They become preachers of their own survival story. They need their collapse to become a ladder. And if it wasn't one, they invent it. But you, if you've endured this far, don't need to lie to yourself anymore. You don't need a moral to your story. You don't need to explain what it all meant. Sometimes, pain is just pain. Sometimes, emptiness is just the sound of falsehoods dying. And that is enough. After the fire, wait. Don't sweep the ruins. Don't start designing the new foundation. Don't build a monument to your old life or your growth. Just wait. Let the ashes settle. Let the smoke drift. Let your hands stay empty. Because sometimes, the best wisdom comes not from rebuilding, but from recognizing you never needed the house in the first place. Maybe what collapsed wasn't your life. Maybe it was the lie that you ever needed to be anything other than awake. Our culture treats every experience like raw material. If you suffer, it must become a lesson. If you fall, it must become content. If you endure, it must become a brand. But the void doesn't need to be useful. You don't need to make something from this. You don't need to teach. You don't need to inspire. You don't even need to understand. You only need to honor it. To say, this happened. I didn't run. I felt every second. And I'm still here. This is the hardest part. Not collapsing, not enduring, but staying in the emptiness after it stops screaming. Because the silence that follows, it's not a pause. It's a test. It asks, will you run back to story? Or will you remain no one free, anonymous, awake? The man who remains, who waits in the silence without forcing a new name upon himself, becomes something rare. A human without narrative. And in that, he becomes real. You don't need more advice. You've been drowned in it. Self-help books, motivational videos, transformational journeys that promise to make you whole again. But you were never broken. You were simply living in a structure that couldn't carry the weight of truth. So now, in this raw and stripped down existence, I offer not solutions but reminders. Not rules but signals. Things you might already know but may have forgotten in the noise. You don't need steps. You don't need a system. You've had enough of those. What you need now maybe is space and someone to speak plainly while you sit in it. So let me speak to you simply. No elevation, no guidance. Just a kind of human remembering. Let the grief finish its sentence. Don't interrupt it. Don't force it to make sense or dress it up in healing metaphors. Just let it ache. Let it ruin your day. That's part of what it came here to do. If you keep it waiting at the door, it will just knock louder. You don't have to explain this to anyone. Not your family, not your friends, not your past self. You're allowed to vanish from the narrative. You're allowed to become illegible to the people who used to get you. It's okay if you don't even recognize yourself right now. That's part of the shedding. And no, you don't need to be witnessed every second. Not everything needs to become a post. Let some moments belong only to you. Let the world not know what you're feeling. There's power in privacy. Sacredness grows in what isn't sold. You might find yourself walking nowhere. Good. Don't walk to get somewhere. Walk because you're here. Let the pavement carry you. Let the motion ask no question. You don't need a route. You don't need to justify your wandering. You are not a product. Beauty will sneak up on you again. A shaft of light. A a sound, the way wind moves through leaves. You don't have to explain it. Just stop. Let it touch you. Let it remind you that life is still happening, even in the rubble, especially in the rubble. Speak to the silence, not for answers, just to clear your lungs. Say things aloud into the room, into the wind, into the mirror. Let your voice remind you that you still exist, even if no one is listening. Touch something real. The world of screens and thoughts will lie to you, but the warmth of a mug in your hands, the weight of your body against the ground, these things don't lie. Come back to them. They are anchors when ideas float away. You will feel the urge to escape. You'll reach for your phone, for the fridge, for something, anything, to fill the space. Let that happen. Don't punish yourself for it, but don't forget to return. Gently, quietly. You're allowed to begin again, 100 times a day. Don't try to make a lesson from this too soon. The mind wants to turn every experience into a moral, a chapter, a quote. But some things are too sacred to be processed right away. Let the meaning take its time, or let it never come. Maybe this wasn't meant to be useful. Maybe it was just meant to be survived. And if, one day, you wake up and realize that nothing has changed but the tea still tastes good, the sun still feels warm, the silence no longer scares you, then perhaps you've already begun. This is what it means to endure, not to triumph, not to rebuild, but to stay fully with what is, even when what is feels like nothing, especially then, because that nothing may be the first honest thing you've ever known. So now you've seen it, the collapse, the silence, the hollow after the story ends. You've sat inside it long enough to stop needing it to be something else. You didn't rush to reframe it. You didn't fill it with noise. You let it stand. And in that, whether you know it or not, you became something very few ever do. You became sovereign, not over the world, not over others, over yourself, over the storm inside you, because you stayed. You stayed through the shaking, the crumbling, the quiet. You stayed when nothing made sense. You stayed when your own name felt foreign in your mouth. You stayed when others told you to find the silver lining, and you knew truthfully there wasn't one. And now, the emptiness is still here, but it no longer owns you. It walks beside you like a shadow, not as a threat, but as proof that you have seen the world without its mask and chosen to remain anyway. This is not numbness. This is not apathy. This is not despair dressed as stoicism. This is clarity, the kind that cannot be bought, the kind that cannot be performed. You do not glow. You do not shine. You don't need to. You simply walk, slowly, barefoot, with eyes open. You are not interested in arguments anymore, not in proving or persuading or defending your place in the world. You no longer want to be right. You want to be real, even if that means being misunderstood, even if that means being invisible. Because the man who has endured the void without collapsing into a new illusion is no longer terrified of non-being. He is not desperate to be remembered. He is not driven to be significant. He is not frightened by silence. He knows the world will forget him. Time will erase him. But he was here. He was. Not as a brand, not as a hero, not as a lesson, as a witness, and sometimes in the quietest hours that is enough. There is no final chapter, no crescendo, no lesson waiting in the last breath. There is only this, a human, awake, not striving, not hiding, just watching. Let the world go on spinning in its fever. You have stepped out of the machinery. You are not healed. You are not whole, but you are free. And sometimes often, that is the only honest ending we're ever given. So let it echo. Let it ache. Let it be enough.